You may have been surprised to see that you were taking an interpersonal relations course as part of your ELCC program. But it's actually really common to have a course like this in any kind of human services program. So nursing, social work, educational assistant, any profession where you're working closely with clients, especially in very personal settings, and where you work very closely and collaboratively with co-workers, is a place where strong communication skills will be of great value to you. So that is really, in a nutshell, why you are taking the course, and hopefully as you go through it, you'll be able to see how you can use the concepts in the course to support you in your work as well as in your personal life. If you think that you don't need to work on communication skills because you really have a strong set of skills, I would say that we all have a little bit of room usually to do some tweaking. For example, when you read this top 10 list of things you should never say to anyone, I'd be surprised if there wasn't something on it that you never say. You might say number 10, you wouldn't understand. 9, because those are the rules. 8, it's none of your business. 7, what do you want me to do about it? What's your problem? You never, or you always. I'm not going to say this again. I'm doing this for your own good. Why don't you be reasonable? And worst of all, calm down. So as you read them, even if you feel like you never say them, I'm sure that you hear them sometimes and you wonder, why do those things cause such reactions in us, and what might we say instead? So the basic beginning of communication theory is to look at, why do we communicate? So we have a variety of needs: physical, identity, social, and practical needs that are met through communication. Our physical need for relationships and for communication in relationships is proven. So as you read the text, you'll read about the health risks for people who do not have satisfying relationships where they can communicate with others. One of the strongest predictors of poor health among the elderly is loneliness, not being able to communicate with others. And I'm sure you've watched all those prison films, enough prison films to know that the reason that solitary confinement is so effective is that it is a horrible punishment for people to not be able to communicate. And again, as you read through the text in the PowerPoint, you'll see that there are consequences for pregnant women and consequences in a variety of other elements of health. So heart disease, which is one of the biggest killers of people in our world, is really affected by social isolation. We also have identity needs. So it's the way that we learn about who we are, the way we shape ourselves, and what our perception, our persona is. So communication helps us to form that interactions with others, the feedback we get from each other, and how we see ourselves reflected in them. Social needs are facilitated by communication, to have friends, to have other people that we care about, and to develop close attachments or attachments with others. All of those social needs are based on communication. And practical needs, just your need to have things happen every day. When you go to a store and you need to request something, if you're with a coworker and you're trying to set up a daily plan, you communicate to do those things, and the more effectively you communicate, the more effectively those kind of needs are met. So that leads into some theory that was written by Abraham Maslow, and you might have seen this or heard this if you took something like an intro psychology course, because Maslow's theory is a really commonly used theory. And basically what he says is that there are several categories of human needs. And then he presents them as a sort of a pyramid, where the lower levels of the pyramid are things that you need to be meeting your needs in before you work on the next level of needs up. So at the bottom are the physiological needs: breathing, food, water, all of this stuff that you have to do for your organism to function. Then safety is the next one, and that really is feeling secure. That you won't go up to the next category of looking after your love and belonging needs if you don't feel like you're meeting basic physical needs and not feeling safe. Once all of that is in place, you can start working on self-esteem and then self-actualization, which is really becoming the best person you can be. So obviously there are times where we fluctuate. Sometimes you may not be getting your physical or physiological needs met. Doesn't mean you lose your sense of self-esteem. But if you were in a prolonged situation where you weren't getting those needs met, then it would have an impact, according to Maslow, on the needs of his triangle, and is also called hierarchy. Here's another graphic from the text. This one talks about how we communicate. So it's a little confusing when you first look at it, but what they're trying to say is if communicator A, so that's to the left, sends a message, that message has to go along a channel, the channel being the way they communicate it. So it might be spoken, it might be through writing. So somehow they have a channel that they send a message, and it's received by person B. While they are sending their message, noise is interfering with the message. So noise can be a number of things, physical noise, but it can also be psychological noise, something in your head, for example. Or so different kinds of noises are at play. So even though you might be sending out what you think is a very direct message, you're not really sure how clearly it's getting through. And as you see in the diagram, in both cases, the sender and the receiver are assigning meaning to what they say or what they hear. And of course, the way we interpret what things mean varies for every individual. So usually sending and receiving are simultaneous. That means they're happening at the same time. So you don't send your complete sentence or message and then wait for someone to pick it up. As soon as you say your first word, they're starting to receive it and starting to think about it. They may be picking up a message from your body language before you even start to form any words. There are meanings in people. So when a message comes to you, it could trigger a meaning that the other person had no idea was there. So for example, if you had just had an argument with your spouse about money, and then you go to visit your mom and your mom makes a comment about you budgeting, you're going to interpret that message maybe as an attack, or it might seem like she was talking to your husband or whatever it was, when it could have been a totally unrelated to that. So whatever is happening in you or is in you is going to influence meanings. Your environment affects communication. So where you are, what's around you. I would say a childcare setting is a challenging environment. There's lots of noise, lots of action, lots of different people coming in and out, the potential for a lot of pressure or misunderstanding. So it can be a difficult environment. as I was saying when we talked about the diagram, is there can be noise all around you. So that can be noise external to you, which would be just sounds around you, or again, going back to a childcare environment, lots of other people talking in the room, maybe someone singing or music playing in the background. So external noise. There can either also be physiological noise, so that's in your body. So if you have a headache, or if you're feeling distracted and can't focus, that also affects communication. And psychological, that would be the mood you're in, or how you feel about the other person. Any of those things in your mind, they'll also affect communication. And the channels, of course, also make a difference, how the message is delivered. So if you look at the list, true or false, or a bit of both, read through the list and think about whether you think they are true or whether they're false. What your text will tell you is that you can consider all of these statements to be false. Now, sometimes it seems like they're a little bit of both. In some circumstances it might be true, but generally they're false. So communication doesn't solve all problems. Sometimes you can very clearly understand someone, they can understand you, and you still have a problem. That's the old agree to disagree. Needing more communication is not always true. Sometimes people have a lot of communication, but they're still not moving forward because the quality of it is poor. And that's related to the more we communicate, the better. If it's a bad communication, more of it is not helping. If you've been arguing with someone, more arguments aren't better. Words have meaning. It's partially true, but it's just not a complete thought. Words have meaning, but the meaning is applied by someone who may have a different understanding of that word or a different history with that word. So it's not just the word that carries meaning. Communication is a verbal process. Again, that's partially true, but it's only part of the story. It's verbal, it's the words coming out of our mouth, but it's also the way we deliver it, the body language, all of that. All communication is intentional, is definitely false. Sometimes you'll find that in moments where you have a strong message and you're fighting very hard not to express it, the look on your face, the way you hold yourself, sends as strong of a message or stronger than words would have. Telling is communicating. That's not true, because communicating is a two-way street. So if you're only giving out information but you're not reading any feedback or not hearing any messages coming back in, you haven't really communicated. Communication is a natural human ability. Definitely not true. We all learn how to communicate, and you know from your experiences in this world that some people are better at it than others. And also you'll see that people who work on it, who work on communication skills, actually become better. Lastly, feelings should be communicated spontaneously and not bottled up, also considered to be false. There are some feelings that are better to being held on to for a while you think about where the feeling came from, whether it's really okay to express it, whether it's a valid feeling. So as we go on in the course and study emotions, you'll know why this statement is considered to be false. So basically, key principles are that communication is transactional. It means that that's a process that's back and forth. It can be intentional or unintentional, and it has both content and relational dimensions. Content being the actual message, but relational being about what you're saying, about your feelings, or relationship with the person you're sharing with. You can't reverse communication, and it's unrepeatable. And that's why if you have an argument with someone and you go back and you say, well, I said, and they'll say, you did not say that. I said whatever. Well, no, you didn't, right? It's impossible to go back and repeat it. It's also irreversible. Once you've heard something, it's pretty hard to shake it off. Not all communication seeks understanding, and sometimes it's a message that just delivers a fact. This is the way it has to be. And it's not always intended to be the beginning of more communication. So although we hope that that is often the case, the reality is there are times when a message has to be sent, and that's that. In the text, you'll see a couple of terms used that are used in different ways in other fields or other kinds of theories. So I just wanted to clarify them here. In this course, when they're talking about quantitative communication, they're just talking about any kind of interaction between two people. And a dyad, when they use the term dyad, is talking about two people interacting. So you're probably familiar with the term triad, which is three people. A dyad is two. The way they use the term qualitative in the text is when it's to talk about the quality of relationships and the quality of communication patterns between people. Those terms are also used in fields like math with entirely different meanings, but that's what they mean in this course. So basically, in terms of personal and impersonal communication, when you're reading the text, it's really just talking about how closely personal or how impersonal relationships are. You'll find that there's a lot of muddy water in the early childhood field because sometimes you start to become quite close to the families that you work with, or you may feel more of a personal connection with some coworkers than with others. So how you communicate is really influenced by that, and you'll be looking at that as we go through the course. The other thing that's really interesting these days is a role of, that was a big flub, the role of computer-mediated communication. It's kind of funny that I didn't stammer reading that term, because that was the hard part of the sentence. Anyway, computer-mediated communication, CMC, just talks about electronic communication. So as we become more apt to email or tweet or send messages, how do we send an element of personal communication in what seems to be a very impersonal environment? So that's a really growing area of communication theory because those are such new technologies. And for you taking a course at a distance, it is kind of an interesting thing. Will you feel like you get to know your instructor at all if you never see them face to face? That kind of thing. The text will also look at issues related to culture. So the groups with which we identify, which are our in-groups or out-groups, those we view as different. So how does culture impact how we communicate? In early learning and childcare, there's quite a bit of intercultural communication, which is communicating with people from different cultures. We have quite a melting pot in Alberta and throughout the country. And so it's really important for you to know when you're dealing with families and parents or co-workers how communications might be different and how you might change your messages or be more aware of hidden meanings in the things that they're saying to you. For example, people think that Canadians and Americans are actually really similar. And maybe I think Americans think that we're very similar to them, but I think you would find that a lot of Canadians, almost most Canadians, would say that, oh no, we're actually quite different. And in the text it talks about some key ones, which are our attitudes toward violence. Part of that is illustrated in how we look at the carrying of firearms, for example, or our role in international disputes. Canada is also known to be more tolerant of diversity. So even though we still have a ways to go, and I think um, shouldn't be complacent about it, certainly we're known to be more open in terms of diversity than they are in the U.S. And it's very interesting. In your text, you'll read some stats about the status of men and women, and how women actually are in a better position in some ways in Canada in terms of how our role is considered to be, or how much of an equal partner we're considered to be. So as you're reading the chapter and as you go through the book, what you should be asking yourself is, what does it take to communicate better? And that's a very personal question. Each of us that experiences the course will have different things that we think we can work on, or different things that we think are our strengths. So please, as you're reading, take that personal approach and think, is this something that I really can learn from? Or is this something that'll help me understand another person that I communicate with? So as you go through learning about communication competence, you'll realize that there has to be a balance between effective and appropriate communication. So for example, if you want a parent to not pick up their child late, it might be very effective to send the message, if you ever pick up your child late again, you're going to be banned from our child care center. That might be a very effective message, but is it an appropriate one? Maybe not. Not if you want to keep that child in the center, if you think that really you'd like to continue to work with the family and you just are hoping for a behavior change, then that wasn't the appropriate message to send. So it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes if you've sent a variety of appropriate messages and they've been ignored, then you do need to move to one that's only meant to be as effective as possible and not negotiable. But usually what we're trying to do is find a balance. So as you work with families and colleagues, you'll find that if you are motivated to understand others and you're open-minded, then you will be more competent as a communicator. So people who experience or think about the world in terms of ethnocentrism believe that their own culture is superior to others, and that colors all of their communications. It causes them to have prejudices, it causes them to engage in stereotyping. So your course will look at how you can examine your own thoughts and try to be as open as possible. Again, you're going to be working very closely with people in a human service profession. So understanding others and being open to others is a critical skill. Always remembering that there's no ideal way to communicate. Just because we do it a certain way in our culture doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. So there can be a lot to be learned by examining cultural communication patterns. Remember that competence in communications is different for different situations. You have to be mindful at all times about being a communicator, and you can have faith that you can learn to be a better communicator. There'd be no point taking this course if you couldn't. You want to develop a large repertoire of skills to be a competent communicator. So if you can't send a message a certain way, then it would be helpful to you to have other ways to approach it, other ways to send a message, ways of working at your message to get it across better. Part of that is adaptability, right? To think, okay, that didn't work, I'm going to try something different. It's important to have the ability to perform skillfully. You can't just be a competent communicator in your head if you can't get the words to come out of your mouth or the messages to come across. So part of it is ability. And being fully involved, being willing to be in a communication, investing of yourself in getting a message and receiving messages. Having empathy for others and perspective taking is really important, and certainly a really big part of our work with children. Also, competent communicators have something that's called cognitive complexity. They're able to think of different ways of viewing an issue. They're not stuck in one perspective. They're also really good at being self-monitors. So that means understanding how others view them or how their communication and behavior affects other people. So they can kind of see themselves out of someone else's eyes.